There we go.
All right, I'm going to share my screen and we will jump in and get started. As always, we have another action-packed agenda. Welcome, everybody. Hard to believe that this is MMI Lab number 3. And we've titled it appropriately. Do you think your nonprofit is ready for earned income? Important success factors to consider before jumping in. Today's an important lab, just like the others have been, because as you're considering either launching a new earned income venture or thinking ahead to growing an existing one, we'd like you to really be thoughtful about, are you ready for it? You know, do you have those success factors in place that are going to make you poised for success? So that will be the focus area for today's lab. As I said, happy 2023 to everybody. We want everyone to make it a good, a happy, a healthy year ahead. Our goals for today, much like they have been for the other labs, are to continue to get some additional insight into earned income. We want you to continue on this journey of exploring earned income possibilities. We've got tools, and we want you to apply that rigor and the thinking and the discipline to identify your most valuable earned income opportunity or opportunities. And as I said before, today is really about considering your agency's preparedness to succeed at an earned income venture. So for our agenda today, we're together until noon. We're going to start with a little bit of a recap from Lab 2. Again, just to ground everybody in what we covered during the last lab. And if we have any newbies today, you'll just get quickly caught up to speed. And then as we dive into the topic at hand, preparing to succeed at earned income, a few things we're going to focus on. So we want to continue to have you think about what are those earned income possibilities that you've been exploring and how might you further vet them? Also, we want to talk a little bit about funding your earned income venture, generating that startup or growth capital, and it's never too early to do that. We want to talk about communication. So how do you engage your various stakeholders when it comes to this earned income idea and bring them along with you? And then we want to dive in and talk a little bit more about this thing that we call LWRCC. Leadership, willingness, readiness, capacity, and culture. And then we'll wrap the session by talking about a few next steps. As we've done in the past, if you would like to get connected and push out any of the information that you hear today on social media, please feel free to do that. We always appreciate it. And I'm going to turn it over to Josephine for just a moment to recap a few Zoom housekeeping items. So Josephine.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Happy 2023. I just love saying that. So everyone's like, you can stop wishing people Happy New Year. I just like the way it sounds. Happy 2023, which in retrospect is happy not 2022. So maybe that's what I'll start saying. Anyway, good morning. So the housekeeping, we've done this before, but just a gentle reminder is please stay on mute unless you're actually interacting with Mike or Larry. Rename yourself if I see one of them says iPad, rename yourself with your first last name and if you can, your organization. If you don't know how to do that, if you move your mouse around your square of your picture, 3 dots will come up on the right-hand side. If you click those 3 dots, a drop-down list will come and it'll give you an option to click rename. If anyone's having trouble with that, you can tell me, and I think I can do it as the host for you if you send me a message in chat. But again, those 3 dots, you click them, and then the drop-down list will give you the option for rename. Feel free to share comments or questions in the chat box. We'll be checking those throughout the session. And then at the very end, there'll be time for, well, actually throughout the whole thing, there'll be time for question and answer as well with Mike and Larry. But if something comes up, please put it in the chat and we'll get to it as soon as possible. That's it. Thanks.
Good. Thanks, Josephine. Also, remember, this is an interactive session. We're going to have ample opportunity for each of you to chime in and share thoughts or ask questions. We have a number of Zoom poll questions as well today. So we encourage everybody to engage throughout the session. All right, let's keep going. We've got our Zoom photo that we want to make sure we take. So I'm going to take us off of screen share for a moment, and I'll ask Josephine to take a couple of shots. If anybody's on doesn't have their video turned on, please go ahead and do that just for a moment so we can get your smiling face on camera. Josephine.
Yep. Hi there. I'm getting it ready. We're going to take 2 pictures. I'll say smile and hold, then relax, and we'll do it again. All right, here we go. Smile and hold. Relax, and we'll do it once more. And here we go. Smile. Perfect. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Josephine. Okay, so why do we take these pictures? Well, we do post them on social media. They've been up after lab 1 and lab 2. They'll go up after lab 3. So if you haven't gone on to the Patterson Foundation's social media or No Margin, No Missions, please make a point to do that so you can like it and share it and follow us and all that good stuff. So back into the slideshow we go. All right, a reminder, lab must-dos. Please remember to keep your minds open as we go through and talk about topic at hand today. Keep those creative exploration of possibilities percolating. We want you to learn something new. We want you to reinforce things you already know, and of course, have a little fun. I think everybody knows us, but again, I'm Mike Oxman, managing partner and principal at No Margin, No Mission. And that guy who you just heard from, who no longer has the ear infection, is Larry Clark. He's the managing partner and principal out of our Seattle, Tacoma office. Also joining us today is Kelly Alexander. She's a fellow at the Patterson Foundation. Michael Corley, who you've seen and heard from before, and Josephine Eisenberg as well. So thanks to our friends at the Patterson Foundation for continuing to support this initiative. So just by way of quick recap, what is this Margin and Mission Ignition initiative about? So we've got 4 learning labs. We've already been through 2, one of which was on-site and one of which was virtual. Today's session, plus we'll have one more, which will be an on-site session towards the end of the month. And each one of these labs is designed to address a specific topic on earned income. We also have 2 mini Zoom consulting sessions, one that took place after lab 1, and we're also going to have one more of those sessions after today's lab. So we look forward to this next one-to-one with each of you, and you'll hear more about that in a few minutes. Also, for those of you who fully participate in the lab series, and you've heard us talk about this before, you will have an opportunity to be considered to advance to the next phase of this initiative, which is a consulting phase. And there will be 4 phases to that initiative. 1 will help you develop a business plan for your earned income venture. Secondly, will help you raise that startup or growth capital to either get that venture off the ground or take it to the next level. And then we'll stay with you to help you implement your business plan and bring it to life. And then beyond that, we will work with you just to make sure that your earned income venture is on track. So quite a thorough, comprehensive consulting phase for those organizations that are interested in the opportunity. We will have an application process to do that, and you'll hear more about that towards the end of the session today. Okay, let's jump in and do our first poll question. Josephine, I'll turn it over to you.
Hi, here we go. Just making sure everyone can see it, right? Yeah, Okay, good. So thinking about your organization's number one earned income possibility, how would you describe it? So you just choose one of these options. It's an existing product service that we want to move from free to fee. We are currently selling the product and service and we want to expand and grow it. It's a product and service that we haven't yet created, or let me get back to you on that one. So you'll click the one that best meets where your organization is at the moment. Those answers are coming in quickly. Let me give you one more second. Perfect, here we go. And it looks like they're developing, launching what they want to do.
So this is a good, I think this is a good set of responses. Most of you are in that category of something we haven't yet created, but we would like to develop, launch, and sell it. So that certainly indicates to us that you've been exploring possibilities and looking for creative opportunities for an earned income venture, a product, a program, or a service. A handful of you have existing products that you want to expand and grow, and that's great. You know, how do you take it to the next level? And it looks like just one of you answered the, let me get back to you on that. And that's okay, because not everybody has to have decided. We're still in that exploration phase, and that's fine. Okay, Larry, I'm going to turn it over to you to take us through the Lab 2 recap.
All right. Good morning, everybody. Let's go through this very, very quickly. What happened at our last lab? Where did we leave off? Hopefully you'll see most of your pictures on here. There's a few newbies today, so you'll see your picture next time. Oops, poll question just came back up again. Mike shared this at the last lab, Thomas Edison quote, when you have exhausted all possibilities, remember this, you haven't. And I think on our last calls with all of you, we talked about this. We talked about, you have so many possibilities. There's probably ones that you haven't quite thought of yet. And many of you were reaching out to board members and others to get additional ideas. We appreciate that. We shared 3 stories, 3 organizations that have gone through MMI, 2 in the greater Sarasota area and 1 in Hartford, Connecticut. We know that either 1 or 2 of you have reached out to a couple of these and asked some questions. We appreciate that. We walked through the process of how they made the decision, how they moved it through their organization, how they raised their startup capital, and how they implemented their business, all of which are going very well right now. So thank you for that. We also touched on LWRCC, leadership, willingness, readiness, capacity, and culture. And as Mike shared, as he was discussing the agenda, we'll dive into this more today. And let's do a little poll question. Josephine.
Yep, here we are. Got it. All right. So thinking about your earned income progress since Lab 2, what has transpired in your organization? We significantly advanced our thinking and action. We made some progress, but now there's much more to do. We didn't move the needle much at all, or we had too many competing priorities and no time to think about it. We should have put the holidays were here.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
We had too much fun or just enough fun for the holidays. I'll give you a few more seconds to answer. And they're still coming in. Here we go. Much more to do. That's always the case.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Well, a lot of you made some progress, and we appreciate that. I mean, over the past couple of weeks, as Josephine said, been in the middle of holidays and kind of transitioning, figuring out how to get back to work after the first of the year. So lots going on. Only a couple of you had competing priorities, so no time to even think about it. That's a very small percentage compared to the rest. So thank you for moving the agenda forward. Mike, I'll turn it back to you.
All right. So we're going to dive into the sort of the meat of the lab today by starting to talk about how do you narrow the focus, continue to vet and assess these earned income possibilities that you've been considering. And if you think back to, I guess, a month ago at Lab 2, which that was, I think, December 14th, one of the homework assignments that you had was to go through and assess your organization's earned income possibilities, either 2 or 3 of them, by doing a bit of a gut check on 6 key vetting criteria that we gave you in a worksheet. So if you recall, this idea of assessing these 6 criteria is something that we want you to continue to do. So today, we're going to revisit those 6 criteria, but rather than ask you to do a gut check, we want to ask you to not just think about each of these criteria in terms of what does my gut tell me, but also start to think about, well, how do you know it? Do you have any specific information that you can either uncover, look for, or identify that will help to answer the question with some information, some data, something more than just that gut check? So when we talk about, is there market need and demand for that earned income venture, whatever it is, we want you to understand, is there a clearly identifiable source of business for your offering? And the idea that, you know, if you build it, they will come should not be one of those criteria. You want to make sure that you can specifically point to specific things that show there's market need and demand. So for an organization that has an existing product or program or service that you've already been selling, that's a how do you know it. For an organization maybe that doesn't have something that they're selling, perhaps you're giving something away, but you get a lot of email inquiries or calls or folks reaching out and asking, is this something that you have, or might you sell it, or could we buy it? That's a how do you know it. So you really want to think about and look for those, I guess, ways that you might be able to prove that there's significant market need or demand for your product or program or service. Secondly, we ask the question, are there customers with dollars to purchase what you have to sell? So this idea that, you know, you may think you have the best earned income venture in the world, but if you haven't really been able to identify a market or a market segment or segments out there who actually have the dollars to purchase it, it may be really challenging for you to succeed at it. So again, the question here is, how do you know it? And might you be able to point to specific things that you know will offer up proof for that? We have worked with a number of organizations who develop products to sell to school districts. And oftentimes Larry and I will say, well, that's great, but remember, school districts oftentimes are challenged in terms of budget. So are there either circumstances that you know of that would allow school districts to purchase something that you have? Maybe there's funding that's coming down specifically from, regional or state or even federal funding. That's a pot of money that could be applied to purchasing what you have to sell. Or there might be, other opportunities for school districts to purchase. But again, you really want to think about it through that lens. So are there customers with dollars to purchase? The third one is what we call operational ease. And we like you to not just ask, but also look to understand, is there simplicity in the development of whatever it is you're going to deliver to your potential customers? And how do you know that? So this idea that we talked about briefly in prior labs is better to have an earned income venture that you can, that has less complexity to it, so that you don't get mired in that complexity. The simpler oftentimes the better. And, if you have an existing earned income venture, you've already got it up and running. But if it's something that you're developing, like many of you said, and that you want to introduce, one of those things that you really want to think about is, how can you develop it in such a way so that you make it as simple as possible and eliminate as much of that complexity as possible. And here's an example too, where you might even look at competitive offerings to see how they're doing it, because sometimes that can be an indication of either operational ease or complexity. The next one we talk about is speed to market. So one thing you really do want to think about is, how long do you think it will take you to develop and launch whatever your earned income venture is? And again, for those organizations who answered the poll question, we're thinking about launching something new. I think the goal oftentimes is to try to shorten the cycle for developing that venture and getting it launched. And as we work with organizations, we will always encourage you to look for those earned income ventures or opportunities that at least are going to have a window that allows you to see, sort of the what it's ultimately going to look like. If you're creating something that has a very lengthy development cycle, that goes out a year and a half, 2 years and a half, 3 years and a half, it may be a little hard to pull that off, just because oftentimes it's so far out in the distance, and typically it may make it more complex. So again, how long will it take to develop and launch your offering, and how do you know it? And this idea of, does it currently exist? And if it does, that'll help shorten the cycle, or are you creating it from scratch? Then, of course, we absolutely want you to think about, assess, and understand what kind of mission contribution your earned income venture will make to your organization. You've heard us talk about this before, and we will continue to talk about it, is the more that your earned income venture is aligned with the mission of the organization, the better, because it obviously will help strengthen the work that you're doing and make it more powerful. So, is the offering mission focused? What impact is it likely to make in terms of your mission? And importantly, how do you know it? And then the last of the 6 criteria that we really want you to think about and really understand, oftentimes this one can be the most challenging, is what kind of margin contribution will the earned income venture make for your organization? So after expenses, how likely is it that this venture will generate a profit, and how do you know it? So we're often asked, well, how do we do this if we're launching something new and we don't really know what that's going to look like. So again, there's a number of ways that you might explore and better understand this. One of which is look at competitive offerings, try to understand what other organizations have, how successful they've been or not, and apply that to your own thinking. You can also do some, I think one thing that Larry and I talk a lot about is trying to at least do some simple projections, understand what it is you have to sell, and if you were to sell a certain number of them at a certain dollar amount, what might that generate in terms of gross revenue, and then start to do some math, again, making some assumptions, and looking at, I guess, a very, very, very basic pro forma. And we'll talk more about that with you and your teams when we do our one-on-one sessions with you. So again, these 6 criteria, all of which we want you to look at and sort of do the how do you know it's. There's going to be homework that you'll have coming out of the session today, and something that we'll be talking with each of your teams about in more detail when we have our one-on-one Zoom sessions with each of you. Okay, so with that, I want to ask Josephine to introduce the next poll question.
Here we go. Thinking about your organization's #1 earned income possibility, which assessment criteria below do you know the least about? Market need and demand. There are customers with money to buy. It can be developed and launched with operational ease. It can be developed and launched quickly. It will contribute meaningful mission impact, or it will contribute a meaningful level of margin. I think this is a difficult one. The answers are coming in a little more slowly. We'll give you some time to think about it. So it's the one that you know the least about. They're still coming in a few more seconds. And here we go. What do you think, Mike?
Well, this one, not surprisingly, is a little all over the place. I think looks like we've got at least one in each of the responses. But most of, let's see, the majority of you congregated it. It can be developed and launched with operational ease. And then we had a tie for it can be developed and launched quickly, and it'll contribute a meaningful level of margin. And then I guess we had responses from one of you for each of the others. So I think this is typically the way we see folks answer this poll question. And, again, it is very different for each organization, depending on where you seem to be landing for your earned income venture possibility. The reason we ask this is, again, just to sort of bring to light this idea that if there's any of these criteria that you don't really know kind of what that's going to look like, it's a perfect opportunity for you to do some homework, to do a bit of a I guess a deep dive to better understand what that will look like. So let's just pause for a minute or two. I'm going to take us off of screen share and just talk about this one. So is there anybody who just would be willing to share kind of why you responded the way you did to that question? So maybe let me ask it this way. For an organization that already has an an earned income venture up and running that wants to grow it and take it to the next level, how did you answer this one? Maybe I can call on somebody. Ken Tarasi at the Sarasota Opera. So
Yeah.
good morning.
Good
So I know
morning.
you guys have an existing earned income venture that's up and
Yeah.
running. You really want to grow it and take it to the next level. Is there,
Right.
how did you respond to this one?
Well, I responded that that we really don't know how much it's going to advance our mission. We know that the business is profitable. Unlike a lot of you, these are, we're not selling costumes, we're renting them. So, once you have the stock, you really have the product to rent. We know there's a market because Malabar did this before us. Unfortunately, we bought the collection right before COVID. So a lot of the companies shut down. We also have a smaller set rental business, but that's harder for us because our stage isn't as big as a lot of the companies, but everybody needs costumes. So the reason that we don't know about mission, I was thinking, okay, well, if our costumes are used by another company in Chicago and the patrons are sitting there in the audience and they look through the program book, it's Sarasota Opera that gets credit for the costume collection. And maybe that says, that might not be a bad place to visit in January and February. So,
Right.
that's certainly a secondary, third market, the possibility. But we know all the other things work. It's kind of part of our business model already, and we're really excited about trying to grow it.
So I think it's a really good point. And, I guess if Larry and I were urging you to think about how do you ensure there's mission alignment or that you're strengthening the mission through that earned income venture, it's a good brainstorm opportunity, for your team to think about what are those different ways that we might make it more mission aligned. So to your point, Ken, maybe it is, ensuring that there's in any program at the opera in city X, Y, or Z, that there's, some sort of acknowledgement to the Sarasota Opera, but there's probably other things that you could do as well that would help to, reinforce that mission. So I think that'll be a good thing for us to talk about during our one-to-one mini Zoom session. So stay tuned on that.
Yeah,
Mike, I have one thing to add.
Yeah.
Ken, another way to think about it is that if part of the mission of the opera is to expose the community to opera, the organizations that are renting the costumes that are exposing the community to opera, you're basically extending your mission through them.
Mhm.
So I guess it's just a kind of a spin on your mission. Maybe it's a much broader community that you'd be reaching, but you're exposing people who wouldn't have been exposed to that opera specifically because you're providing the costumes. So I think you can think about it a bit differently about who your community is in that case and who's getting exposed to that opera because of you.
thank
Good
you.
point. Good point.
Hmm.
Let's hear from somebody else. Maybe we can go to Kinsey, Rob at the Art Center Sarasota. What is the sort of earned income venture opportunity that you're looking at, and what might you know the least about of those 6 criteria?
I would say one of the areas that I think we could definitely add to our organization that would be a source of income would be using our space for rental as a rental facility. There are couple opportunities during on the weekends, like Saturday evenings, Sundays we're closed. So that's an entire day that we could be utilizing rentals. I responded actually that one of the things that it's not necessarily would it serve our mission. I feel like anybody who walks into the Art Center, whether they're renting our space for, a bat mitzvah or for a nonprofit organization that needs space for an event, they would be getting exposure to the visual arts, which is something that's, an important part of our mission. What I would be more curious about is the kind of the need in the community for rental spaces and what those might look like, and what our, not necessarily our competition is, but what are all the other venues kind of in Sarasota doing, and where would we fit in on that?
Good point. Well, I can tell you just by virtue of the fact that we've been working with Resilient Retreat on their venue rental business, that there is tremendous need in our region for really nice, spaces for venue rentals. Josephine can attest to that. Patterson Foundation does a number of events, and we're always challenged to find good spaces to do events. So yeah, we can talk more about that as well during our one-on-one, but there's probably a lot of proof that there is need and demand for a good space.
That's great.
Yeah, and let's ask one more of you to share. Is anybody want to raise their hand and share? And if not, I can certainly call on somebody. Aaron at Save Our Seabirds. What is the earned income venture you guys are considering? And what might be the, of the 6 criteria, the one the least about?
Sure. So it's a form of ecotourism with a focus on high-end birding tours. So it aligns with the mission quite well. Because it's more on the higher end, we think it would help with our margin. Our concern is operational ease, getting it started. My probably chief concern is hiring the right staff. I mean, most of the folks on this call who hire staff right now, it's a very challenging time. So we'd be looking for established guides who know the area, who can bring people to really fun, exciting birding spots. Transportation could be an issue. And then the main thing is, just coordinating with the different resorts and hotels and getting the word out of what we're doing without having an established reputation of doing it, right? We have a great reputation in terms of being a nonprofit bird rescue, rehabilitation, and education, but not so much in terms of this. So that's the only, it's not a deal breaker, but it's the unknown, right?
Yeah, got it. Well, I always think about like the Moat Boat. That's an interesting, sort of eco tour that's been popular over the years. Operationally, probably not the easiest thing to do, but I guess they figured out a way. So you guys could probably, help answer that question by doing some good kind of competitive, research and gaining understanding that way. Well, a good discussion. And again, for those of you who haven't shared, save that discussion for the one-on-one, because Larry and I will be diving in and talking more about this with each of you. So I'm going to share my screen again, and we'll go back in, and I'll turn it back over to Larry. Larry, are you there?
Helps to go off of mute. Thanks, Mike. So funding your venture, always, there's some startup capital needed. Many of you have something that's existing. Many of you want to create something new. Think about the cost associated with getting that out. All of you, for instance, would need to change your website or update your website. That's a cost associated with that as an idea. So it's going to take some money to get your venture off the ground or to grow it. And there's ways, I guess, things that you need to spend those dollars on. Think about staffing. And Aaron just mentioned having the right staff in place. There's a cost associated with that. Maybe some startup funding would cover that. Marketing and communications, all of you would need to market and communicate whatever that product or service is to get it out there. Maybe there's some capital expenses. Using Aaron as an example again, if they're actually going to take people on tours, maybe they need kayaks, maybe they need a van, maybe they need something like that to get that off the ground. Usually there's computer equipment that's involved, some other type of capital expenses. Might even be you need to reconfigure part of your space, and there's some costs associated with that. When we worked with Manatee Performing Arts Center, they had to do some reconfiguration of their space and do some updating. There was a pretty significant cost associated with that. Technology, as I mentioned, computers, but it might be cell phones, it might be iPads, it might be other types of, or software that you need to have. Could be rent or it could be something else that isn't on this list that you would still need for that startup capital and growth. So here's some ways that we have seen nonprofits raise those dollars through direct donors. So as we have mentioned, we do a fast pitch. After the business plan is complete, donors will be invited, hopefully they're donors, will be invited to that fast pitch, and hopefully they'll provide a donation. Some nonprofits have received grants to cover those startup or growth capital costs. There might be an investor, but we see them as venture capital, angel investors. There's usually not a return, a financial return, if ever, to that investor. Maybe there's some crowdfunding that takes place. Maybe there's a business plan competition that takes place. We have seen, actually, I don't think any of our nonprofits have ever taken out a loan to cover those startup costs, but that's always an option. We've had a few nonprofits actually self-fund that have a significant reserve fund or an endowment in place, and they can come up with whatever those startup costs are to cover themselves. Or there might be other ways that, again, aren't on this list. But here's a whole kind of laundry list of ways that we have seen organizations raise their startup or growth capital. Maybe what we can do is dive in and talk about a couple of organizations, provide you maybe some ways that they've done it. I'll turn it over to Mike.
So one of the organizations that we worked with is the AAA, one of the AAAs in Chicago, Area Agencies on Aging. It's called Age Options. So we worked with them to help them develop a brand new earned income venture. It's called Advisory. And essentially what Advisory is a set of services that help to navigate Medicare and Medicaid in terms of very complex, essentially information that oftentimes individuals and organizations have when they're out trying to better understand those two different options. So Advisory was actually created by Age Options to help folks navigate those complicated areas. They had about $150,000 in startup capital that they needed to generate to get this venture off the ground. And because the organization, I guess, was large enough, had a large enough operating budget and had accumulated some dollars over time that they wanted to allocate to this, they decided to self-fund the startup capital. So as Larry said, I would say that of all the organizations we've worked with over the years, self-funding is not as common, but it is for an organization that does have some resources. It is certainly one that you can consider. So that's Advisory. Larry?
Yeah, the next one is Habitat for Humanity in Charlotte County. And many of you heard Mike Mansfield speak last year, actually, during our executive coaching leadership series in preparation for this series about the work that they do. A business plan that we helped them create was a clean out and removal business. They were getting calls for, my mom has passed away. I don't live there. Can somebody go and clean out her house? And, you can keep the merchandise. So they created this business and they actually made money on two sides. One, they were paid to go in and clean out the house and are still getting paid. And on the other side, they were actually selling many of the items through the retail store. So they were kind of making double off of this business. They had around $100,000 in startup costs. They needed some staffing. They needed to cover some transportation expenses. They needed to upgrade some of their software. They raised all their startup capital through donors. They did two different fast pitches, one that we helped coordinate and one that they did on their own with donors that couldn't attend the first fast pitch. So they got 100% of their startup capital from donors. The next one is Courage 360. It's an organization here in the Seattle-Tacoma area that we worked with a few years ago. And they work with people in really career development. They do a lot of soft skills training. And they had created a curriculum called Reach Plus. And they didn't know what to do with it. They were getting calls on how do you come in, can you train us on this, on soft skills training? And we helped them put a business plan together. And they actually went after a grant, a foundation in the Seattle-Tacoma area, presented the business plan to them, and that foundation funded 100% of their startup costs. Doesn't happen very often. But it's another opportunity for them to create that relationship with the foundation. The foundation got a copy of a very extensive business plan, had never seen anyone do this before, and were very open and willing to providing funding. So a grant, that's how they received their startup growth capital.
Okay, another way to raise that startup or growth capital is through crowdfunding. And you've heard us talk about Peepers before, the earned income venture from the Lighthouse Vision Loss Education Center in Sarasota. So interestingly, they had to raise about $85,000 in, I guess, growth capital, because they had an existing store, but it was a very small store, and it really wasn't at all what they wanted it to be. So as Peepers was being conceived, they decided to take a little bit of a different approach, and rather than go to their larger donors, they wanted to bring this to lots of sort of smaller donors. So what they did is they actually created an appeal letter to donors that had a story in it. And I would say it was one of those stories that appealed to people's hearts, because it talked about real individuals whose lives were changed by purchasing for example, a digital magnifier. Suddenly it opened up a world for them, because it allowed them to see, to read better, and to do those things that were so missing in their life. So this appeal letter turned out to be quite successful, but rather than getting a few large checks to reach their $85,000 goal, they got lots of smaller checks for $10 and $25 and $50 and $100 and $250 and $500. So again, this is another way to raise startup or growth capital that might be a little bit different from what you've thought about in the past. One more example. We worked with an organization called the Tampa Bay Healthcare Collaborative, whose mission is to promote and advance health equity to people who are negatively affected by unfair barriers that relate to their health. So a unique area of expertise for this organization was cultural competency training, to be able to assist organizations, especially health and human service organizations in this area. So interestingly, there happened to be a business plan competition that was going on in Tampa that was sponsored by SVP in Tampa, the Social Venture Partners. And they were offering up a cash prize for those organizations that went through this competition and who would be actually selected to win. Tampa Bay Healthcare Collaborative happened to be one of those. And they generated some significant dollars, which they were in turn able to apply towards their startup capital for this venture. So again, another way to do it, a business plan competition, if there is one that you can identify either locally, regionally, or even nationally. Okay, so those were some examples of how you can generate startup or growth capital. Let's see, Josephine, I'm going to turn it over to you to launch the next poll question.
I got it. Here we go. thinking about your organization's number one earned income possibility, which method of raising startup growth capital do you think would be, would generate the greatest funding? There's seeking donations, applying for grants, pitching to investors, using a crowdfunding approach, entering a business plan competition, securing a bank loan, self-funding. And technically, right, Mike, it could be a variety of them.
Correct.
For this answer, you'll choose one, but for your earned income, you could use several of these ways of raising the money. The answers are coming in. So far, yep, 2 people have said the self-funding with money from their organization. That would be great. Anyone else? And we'll close it out now. Here we go. What do you think, Mike, Larry?
Well, it's go ahead, Mike.
I think the you gravitated toward the ones that we thought you would. So grants and donations, that's our comfort zone typically, and that's fine. Pitching to investors, you know, we love that. That's why we do our fast pitch or our Shark Tank. So for those of you, you know, who decide that you're interested in pursuing the next phase of this initiative, and you do become one of the organizations that participates, you will pitch investors as part of a fast pitch. And then the self-funding, we had a couple of you who had answered with that one, and that's perfectly fine. You know, if you have the dollars, whether it's a portion of your total startup or growth capital or just a part of it, that's fine. It shows you have some skin in the game and you're willing to put those dollars toward the venture. And that can also help you generate other funds as well, because investors and donors like that. So Larry, anything else that you want to add to that?
No, I think it's great. I think they all
All right.
gravitated to the ones we thought.
All
So
right.
let's think about that startup and growth capital a bit more. And this will be a part of your homework. There's a worksheet number 2. So we want to see some specifics on this worksheet. So who could provide the funds? If you know who those people or those organizations or corporations might be, right, you know, be very specific, write the name down. You know, it's not going to be shared with anybody, but it helps begin to put that thinking in your head about, you know, we've always wanted to ask them for funds. This might be the perfect opportunity for us to get in front of them to talk about this new business opportunity. How would the funds be acquired? What does that look like? Do we send emails? Do we make meetings? How are we going to get those monies in the door? Fast pitch is one of those. Beyond that, how will you think about that? When would the conversations begin? We love the conversations to begin as soon as possible. So there's no surprises. A lot of funders, especially large donors that want to give you $30,000, $40,000, $50,000, feel better if they're a part of the thought process as you're putting it together. So we'll really encourage you that once you decide what that business opportunity is, to start some of those conversations sooner than later with those individuals that you think might be larger donors to you. Who on staff is going to, or the board, might be responsible for that. And a lot of times, you know, if you're fortunate enough to have a development officer, they might be in charge of it. But definitely your ED or those on your senior leadership team and board members will be involved with the process. And think about this, what strings will be attached? If you get a grant from a foundation, or if a donor is very specific and they might have some strings attached. We don't like to see strings attached to dollars in startup capital, just because it's one more thing you have to be concerned about. it's great if it's a unrestricted gift for this business. But sometimes there's strings attached, and you might have to, really consider that prior to moving forward with it. So why don't we open it up for just a second, talk about this. So anybody want to talk about some thoughts that they have right now as an organization, maybe the EDs or even a board member, where some startup capital might come from? You don't have to name somebody's name on this call, but maybe provide some thoughts that you have right now about, if we need to raise $50,000, where are we going to get those funds? Somebody like to raise their hand, and maybe Josephine and Kelly, if you can kind of look at the chat box to see if somebody's up. Love to know before I have to call on somebody, which I will, trust me.
I can share what we're doing.
Okay. Is that Jordan?
Yeah.
Hi, Jordan.
Good morning, everyone. So one thing that Shannon and I have been looking at is ways that we've raised capital in the past. And we've had some regular investors. We haven't really submitted a proposal or set any sort of meetings with investors that are in the area. So part of my involvement being the community outreach director is networking around the city, around the area, and telling more about our story and getting some of those meetings scheduled.
Great. So beginning that networking and talking about it. It's a great opportunity. Somebody else like to share kind of what their thoughts are at this point. Granted, you might not have even decided exactly what that earned income might be, but okay, I'm gonna have to call on somebody. Ron, love for you to share about Sunshine Academy and what your thoughts are. Let's just say you have to raise $50,000. Where do you think you'll get those funds?
Sure. There we go. That's a challenge for us. That's one thing I like about the possibilities that we're talking about here all in general. Our constituents, our customers are subsidized families already. So we kind of know we can't go for any significant funding from our parents, because 99% of our parents are receiving a subsidy in order to attend the school or the daycare. We are part of a church organization, which we also know financially is not able to help us at this time, especially after the last 2 years of attendance and COVID. So that's a good question for us. I'm intrigued by some of the opportunities that y'all have already presented to us to pitch our additional income opportunity to some investors or grants or whatever. I think what we're working on may intrigue some people because it both, I think, can generate some money, and it does contribute to our mission at the same time. So I think we're looking to those opportunities as probably our primary direction, because we've never really done fundraising before in general at all. So we pretty much are tuition based, and say most of that tuition comes from actually the state of Florida in some one way, shape, or form through their Step Up for Students or their various grant programs for private education and daycare. So it is a challenge for us, but I think we could probably, the path we're headed on, I think y'all can help steer us in the right way there, and I think there'll be opportunities. I think people will be. I think we can present a story that will sell.
Good. All right. Thank you, Ron. Let's do one more. I'd like to do NAMI. I know, Colleen, you're off camera. Could somebody at NAMI share maybe some thoughts that they have?
I'm back. I was eating an apple, sorry.
Okay.
And I didn't want you all to hear my crunching or see my crunching.
I'm just glad to hear it. So go ahead. Go ahead, Colleen.
Yeah, exactly right. Maybe I should have. I think one of the things that with our number one idea, we had a donor who invested in us this just this past couple of months ago for this program. And so it really kind of gave us that kickstart seed money to at least start it. What we know is that that piece of it isn't sustainable. So, we've been looking at a bunch of different areas, and I think probably where we need the most guidance. I was one on the poll that checked the pitching to investors, and that's just something that we don't have any experience in. And I think we've got a few folks in particular on our board now who are more engaged in that type of area, but it's something that we could use, that we could definitely use some help on, because we have kind of that. So I feel like we have a little bit of that seed money to start us, but it's how do we do the rest of it and make it, really operational long-term, because we think long-term it could be a good revenue generator.
Right. Good. All right. Well, going out and looking for investors, and we again call them mission impact investors. Once we get to that point and start business planning, then Sarah Leonard, as we mentioned, joins us as a team and helps with that process also. So you'll have a fundraising executive coach that will be working with you hand in hand, along with either Mike or myself in that process. So good. Thank you all for sharing. Let's move on, Mike.
I was just going to note one thing as well to Colleen's point, and I think this is something just to keep in mind for all of you. The beauty of pursuing an earned income venture, or one of the beauties of pursuing an earned income venture, is that because it's an entrepreneurial venture, a business venture, oftentimes it gives you an opportunity to start having discussions with, engaging with folks who are entrepreneurs in the community. Individuals who are in business and other related fields, which perhaps you wouldn't normally do. So when you've got a business plan for an earned income venture, it's another opportunity to perhaps engage some other stakeholders who could invest in your organization or your venture. So just again, another thing to be thinking about in terms of how you can expand that universe of prospects who may be willing to provide some startup or growth capital for your venture. Okay, let's keep moving. The next thing we want to talk about, which again is another, at least to our way of thinking, important earned income success factor, is communication. So how can you communicate in ways that will keep various stakeholders informed about, what you're planning for your earned income venture? And again, this is intentional. It's communication that would be very intentional and focused specifically on your earned income venture. So there's a number of benefits for organizations that do communicate about your earned income venture. One is it gives you an opportunity to, educate and inform folks, and that's always a good thing. By doing that, by communicating with them, it helps you build some support for your earned income venture, hopefully early in the process. You don't want to wait to do this. It also allows you to just create some transparency. So the more you're talking about it and sharing with others, the more they understand it, and get it and know what you're up to, which in turn then eliminates any mystery that might, surround kind of what you're doing. And then, again, like, we just think that it's very efficient when you communicate and communicate well with others. So kind of this, combination of benefits that accrue from communicating about your earned income venture. So let us give you a couple of examples. This happens to be an example of a thumbs up good way that an organization we worked with communicated about their earned income venture. It's called Generation Schools Network. They are an organization that has a whole model around how to improve sort of the high school approach to learning. So how teachers teach and how students learn, and then they go into school districts and have a whole set of a whole menu of offerings, I guess, including tools and resources, and they have consulting services that go along with it. Okay, so what did they do to communicate about this whole earned income venture? So the first thing they did was they made sure that their board was involved in all of their earned income discussions and planning, which again is one of the reasons why we've asked all of you and your teams to make sure you have the executive director and CEO, a board member, and a staff member participate, even in these early learning sessions. The more folks on your board know and understand and can participate in what you're up to, the more buy-in and likely success that you'll have as you move forward. Secondly, their questions were addressed on an ongoing basis. So, you know, this whole idea of communication plays out or should play out at a number of different levels. So making sure that folks understand, your stakeholders understand what you're up to, and when there are questions, that you do your best to answer them as you're going. They made personal calls to any of their key funders to give them a sense for what we're up to. Here's what we're working on. Here's why we think it's important. And here's, you know, how we think you may be able to help at the appropriate time. So again, when you have good relationships with various funders, engaging them in conversations early on and involving them as appropriate. They also did something that we believe is important, is they added this earned income topic to their agenda for staff meetings and for board meetings. And they just made it a part of every meeting so that they could at least bring folks up to speed, let everybody know where things were at, and importantly, ask them when appropriate to share, to participate, and to to weigh in, which in turn helps with ongoing buy-in. And then one other thing they did is they actually asked us, Larry and I, No Margin, No Mission, to participate in a couple of board presentations, because as many of you know, when it comes to areas where perhaps others have more expertise, it's quicker, more efficient, and more effective to have sort of the experts provide at least some sort of information to your board. So we should be careful what we wish for here, because maybe our phone will start ringing and you'll ask each of us to participate in your board meetings. But the point here is that these are examples of those things that get the thumbs up from us in terms of how you communicate. All right, now on the flip side, we're going to share with you an organization that gets the thumbs down. We're not going to tell you the name of the organization. We've called it Organization X to protect protect them, I guess. But I think the key here is that they made a conscious decision that they were going to do very little communication with their board about earned income. And maybe this was a cultural thing in this organization. Had we known this is the way it was going to play out, we probably would have been less likely to work with them. We've gotten smarter over the years because we actually now talk about this in advance of even working with an organization to find out, how do you communicate with your board? So they shared only on a need to know basis. Don't ask. If they weren't asked, they didn't tell. They didn't have board members present at any of their key sessions that were related to their earned income planning. And that was, very obvious. Same thing when it came to discussions and so forth about how to move their earned income venture forward. As we progressed through the whole sort of business planning process, there were very few updates to the board. And what happened was that, not a huge surprise, but as they got to the end of their business plan and they were seeking approval from their board and even looking to raise their startup and growth capital, there were a lot of challenges, a lot of pushback, and a lot of disagreement. And anybody want to venture a guess about what happened with this organization's earned income venture? Yeah. So Lisa, I saw your thumbs down. The board actually pulled the plug on it. And it was really disheartening for the leadership of the organization and the staff who had worked so hard on their earned income business plan and attempting to move this forward, because had the board been involved from the beginning, had they been communicated with properly, had there been kind of that very ongoing approach to open communication, it would have been a different end result. So with that, Josephine, let's introduce the next poll question.
Got it. Here we come. How would you describe your organization's communication activities related to earned income during the MMI Lab series? We've covered our bases. We've had conversations with board, staff, donors, etc. We've shared with staff and board, but not with anyone else. Not too many people know. We're waiting to finalize the selection of our earned income offering, and it's a well-kept secret. We haven't talked to anyone. This one is not difficult for folks to answer. The answers are coming in so quickly, just fabulous. And I'll give you another second. I think everyone's in. Okay, here we go.
Well, we love that nobody said it's a well-kept secret and we haven't talked to anyone. So that's great news. And, you know, I think the idea that each of your organizations have done some sharing is a real positive. We're still early in the process. And the good news is you have plenty of time to engage others and share with them about what you're up to. So again, Larry and I will be sharing more with you, talking more about this with you during our one-on-ones. But yeah, err on the side of over communicating, and that typically will serve you well as you're looking ahead to your earned income venture and its success. So back to our worksheet homework for in preparation for our one-to-one Zoom. We want you to really think about, and on your worksheet, you know, be thoughtful about who are you keeping informed about and engaged in the work. So again, board, staff, any donors, you know, that you think would be interested in this, and also perhaps some of the unlikely suspects as well. Volunteers, for those organizations that have volunteers, absolutely bring them along, let them know what you're up to, because you never know who in your volunteer network may raise their hand and have ways that they can participate as well. If you have partner organizations, either that you're currently partnering with, or perhaps have partnered with in the past, or are thinking about partnering with in the future, this is a perfect opportunity to at least communicate with them to some degree about your earned income venture or your idea for your earned income venture. Any potential customers or clients, that's an opportunity as well. And if there's others that make sense. Surveys, if any of you ever do SurveyMonkey surveys, this is an interesting opportunity too, because it is a way for you to start to communicate about what you're up to various stakeholders start to get some information back from them. So again, lots of opportunities here. And then secondly, this idea of how are you keeping stakeholders informed about and engaged in this work? So for those of you who in the Zoom poll just answered the question that we're doing, we've done or are doing a number of things, that's great. If you're not, you can also add these to your kind of list of ways to communicate. So in board meeting updates, get it on the agenda. Staff and volunteer meeting updates, get it on the agenda. If you're doing any funder or investor outreach or updates, add it to the agenda. As Larry said earlier, email is a wonderful thing because it's not too difficult to blast, appropriate information out to those folks who you think could benefit from it. And of course, if there's anything else that you are doing or would like to do or can think of to do in terms of communication, add it to the list. All right. So
Mike, can I add one thing?
Yes.
Something that we've seen some organizations do, which is really beneficial to them, is don't just share information with them, ask them a question. So as you're moving through the business planning process, or as you're moving through our lab series, ask them one of those questions, get their feedback and input as you move forward. They'll feel engaged already just by you asking, what do you think about this? Or what about that? So ask questions. Another idea.
Right. All right. So let's move from communication to the next area. And Larry, I'm going to turn it back to you.
Thanks, Mike. Here's our last content area for today before we dive into kind of what's next. So this is really, are you prepared to move forward? And the next slide, Mike. We've talked about this. We introduced it at the last lab, is leadership, willingness, readiness, capacity, and culture, LWRCC. So we're going to dive into each one of these and talk about them a bit. This is part of your homework. Because we want to know kind of where you sit right now with each one of these organizations. And we want to talk about those areas with you on our one-on-one call that's coming up here shortly, the next 2 weeks. So the first one, and I'll take this one, is leadership. So really kind of leadership of your staff and leadership of your board. Is the executive director, which all of you are on the call, and your board committed to move forward with this? Are you ready to kind of take your time and make that commitment to move forward? Is there a champion on your staff and your board for earned income? We love if there's a champion, and many of you on the call today have shared kind of the passion around whatever your idea might be. That's that champion that we want to see come through. Is the full board on board for earned income? So many of you might be thinking, I've got 20 board members and 18 of them are ready to go. 2 of them we're going to have to educate along the way. So it just helps you think about, when do you need to start having those conversations? How can you move those board members along? Do you as a staff do it? Does a board member do it? And is the executive team ready in it for the long haul? We're going to work with you for 2.5, 3 years. That's a long haul for most organizations. So you better be ready to stay in for the long haul, and that business will go far beyond our engagement. So it's not something you start and stop. It's not a grant you received, and once the grant funds are done, you can stop doing the project. We really, really want to see that team engaged for the long haul. So leadership, it's so important as you move forward.
And one of the things that we always talk about is you're going through and looking at each of these areas, LWRCC, and thinking about these questions that we're posing. You can, after you've gone through, thought about them, talked about them, this idea of giving them a green light, a yellow light, or a red light is a good way to think about it. So if you get a green light, that's a good place to be. If you get a yellow light, or this idea of proceeding with caution, the good news is that you can work to dial that particular area up to move it to more of a green light. If you get a red light, because in each of these areas, you just realize that the answer to these, each of these questions is we're not ready. I think that's a pretty good indication that, you need to pause, or, now might not be the right time. So as we go to this second area of preparedness, we talk about willingness. So answering the questions like, is there a strong desire, enthusiasm for earned income? And in some organizations, the answer is, absolutely, unequivocally yes. Whereas in others, you may see a bit more of a divide. So maybe there's a few folks in the organization who have that strong desire, but you might have a few others who are not. And then we have seen in some organizations where there might be an executive director or a CEO who has a strong desire for earned income, but nobody else does. So, again, just something to really think about and be aware of. Is there a shared belief and understanding about earned income by staff, volunteers, donors, other key stakeholders? So that's an interesting question, because if you said yes, that's great. If you said no, there's ways that you can change that. So information, education are great things, and you can bring folks up to speed. One thing that Larry and I always recommend is that, we've given you all copies of the slide decks from each of the labs. So a good way to make sure that folks are understanding and buying into this whole idea of earned income is to take them through an overview of the labs that you've been through. It can, really help elevate the awareness and understanding. Are there passionate advocates for earned income? That's always a good thing. If you've got 1 or 2 or 3 folks, whether at a board level, staff, they can help bring others along. We call them passionaries at the Patterson Foundation. So who are your passionaries who can really advocate to help move this forward? And then, as I said before, this idea of, do you have a green light for earned income? If yes, that's great. If no, how can you dial that up? And also, likely there will be some barriers that you're going to encounter along the way. So as long as folks understand and know that, you're willing and able to help identify ways to overcome those barriers is a good thing. So again, that's willingness. And the next one is readiness. So when we talk about readiness, it's sort of like this idea of talk versus action, stable versus unstable, and specifically asking questions like, are we prepared to take action for earned income? So you will hear us say all the time that this initiative is truly about taking action. It's not just talk, it's moving it through to always go beyond the talk to make those things happen that we've been sharing with you as part of an earned income initiative. Hopefully, your organization is in a place where you're driving towards thrivability. When we talk about thrivability, again, we are hoping there's strength and stability in the organization. Again, we found over the years that those organizations that are struggling to keep the doors open, just as an example, would be hard pressed to be successful at an earned income venture, simply because there's so many other important priority areas of focus that need to be addressed. So that's a key component of readiness. And then, we always ask, is your organization good at planning and execution? So it's one thing to be able to plan, as we do with this initiative. Developing a business plan is a great thing because it helps you look at and understand what has to happen in order to either launch or grow your business venture. Then, just because you have a business plan, though, doesn't mean that you'll succeed. That business plan actually has to be implemented and executed. So are you an organization or a team that can do that? And that's a critical component as well. You can look to, for example, your own organization if you've been through strategic planning. It's one thing to develop a strategic plan, it's another one to bring it to life. So if your team has done that and has been good at it, it's very likely that you'll do well at an earned income venture. So that's readiness.
Mike, can I add one thing to readiness?
Uh-huh.
Is there organizational stability and I guess another factor here is if the executive director is planning on turning over in the next 6 months, that could be a problem. We've started business planning before and that hasn't been disclosed to us. And the executive director decides to leave or had decided to leave, but it hadn't been announced yet. That creates a lot of instability in the organization, which in turn causes some instability in the planning process. So making sure that the executive director is going to hang around for a while is really important to us.
Good. All right, Larry, you want to talk about capacity?
Yeah. So capacity is, think about the resources that you have, whether they're funds or talent on your board, your staff, to really pull it off. So are there some available resources for earned income? Granted, we just spent 20 minutes talking about you probably don't have the financial resources. I think one organization already said that they do. But so, you'll need to raise some money. Do you have the resources available to even raise the money is a question. Is the organization willing to allocate that needed talent and time for earned income? It's going to take some of your executive director's time through the planning process and implementation. It'll take some of your board members' time, and then some staff members' time, obviously, and potentially some other volunteer members. Are there some existing or potential funds available for earned income? As Colleen said, they already received some grant dollars that, to help kickstart their business. Somebody else said that they're going to do some self-funding. So maybe, having that conversation earlier with your board members saying, as we start this, could we fit some of these funds into our budget might be helpful. Are there any existing or potential partnerships or strategic alliances that can be leveraged for earned income? So maybe you already have some partnerships out there. Maybe they could provide some funds to you. Maybe they could be a distribution partner for you. So think about your capacity and maybe leveraging some of those alliances as you move forward. That's capacity. Make sure you're ready. And the last one is culture. Is there an entrepreneurial spirit? And I think what Mike and I have seen in each one of the calls that we have, that we see that, at least on those that are participating in the calls, that you have an entrepreneurial spirit. Do you see opportunities where others don't? So it's that kind of really good thinking skills that you have to come up with those new ideas and maybe think a bit differently as you move forward. You're not just like, oh, we've always done it this way, so we can't do it differently in the future. Openness to change, to new ways of doing things. Sometimes as, when we start to have these conversations and we pose a question and we get a pushback like, no, that's not how we do it. It's like, well, maybe you can think about doing it a bit differently in the future, which usually always happens. There's always something in the business plan that an organization has to change a process in doing it. So be flexible and willing to adjust your culture around that. Is your organization nimble and flexible? Sometimes, think about a for-profit business. They can make decisions fairly quickly. They have to. How many times are you challenged as a nonprofit to say, we have to think about this for 48 weeks. We have to have 28 committees talk about it. It has to go to our board 14 times before a decision can be made. So think about that nimble, flexible, can you make decisions sooner than later as you move forward? And the last one is calculated risks. Are you willing to take a calculated risk? And again, in business planning, you've done a lot of work to put that business plan together. You've taken a risk to move forward, but you're also doing that calculated piece. You're putting the data together to actually make a really good informed decision. Are you willing to take that risk? And do you have some experiences in the past where you can show us, we did it that way? This is one of them. So that's culture, making sure you have that entrepreneurial spirit and all those kind of sub bullets, which is on worksheet number 4. So let's do a poll question. Josephine, I'll turn it over to you.
Larry, I just want to make one comment because
Sure.
with LWRCC, you know, there's a lot involved with it. And the reason we talk about this and share it with each of you and your organizations is we do think it's important to your success when you're ready to launch or grow an earned income venture. With that being said, you don't have to be perfect at all these things that we just shared. I mean, the whole idea here is that as you look at each one of them, you know, how do you stack up? And is there an understanding that you have general strength in at least, you know, more than one of these areas? Because again, the idea here is that if there's one or two of them where perhaps you're not where you want it to be, you can work on that. You can identify what needs to be done to dial it up. And that's a good thing. So again, we just want to make sure everybody understands we're not looking for you to answer every single one of these with a yes, because there's not a whole lot of organizations that could do that. But if there are some things like, for example, you've got an executive director or a CEO, like Larry said, who you know is going to be leaving, that can jeopardize the success of an earned income venture. And there's other things that could be percolating or happening along the way. So with that.
So just one more thing. You can see that that's worksheet number 4. Just to add what Mike has said is if you are, I don't want to say deficient, but lacking in one of these, there's an opportunity on worksheet number 4 to say, if we move forward, how would we mitigate this? What do we need to do between now and then or during the process to make sure that we don't fall down in this area? It's important to us to see how you'll mitigate that. So, all right, let's move on to the poll. Josephine.
Yes, here we go. Thinking about your organization's LWRCC today, how would you describe it? We're strong in all 5 areas and are prepared for earned income success. There's one area that definitely needs strengthening to improve our likelihood for the success. There are 2 or 3 areas that need work before we are ready to proceed. I wish we could say we're ready, but we're not. And the answers are coming in.
A little slower.
Yeah, they're coming. It takes a second to, some of these are, you know, thought-provoking for sure.
Right. Yeah, we don't have trick questions in here.
Yeah, sometimes we have, you know, what's today's, what is it called, Mike? Like what holiday, national, like donut day or something.
Yeah.
Those are a little easier.
That's it.
All right, I'll give you another second. I think everyone who's going to answer has, and here we go. Great. What do you guys think?
It's good. Well, I'm extremely happy. No one clicked that bottom. We wish we were ready, but we're not. A few of you think that there's a couple of areas that probably need some work as you move forward. 4 of you at least said we are ready to go. We are not perfect, but we're good in all areas. And then there was a few of you who said, well, one area we might need some help with. Thank you for taking that poll.
Yeah, and this is exactly where we would hope you would be as organizations. Right. There's, you know, I don't think that for any of you, there's something here that's a real deal breaker, but you know, looking for opportunities to strengthen and improve is a natural thing. So, okay.
Should we open it up? Good. So maybe my question is, as an organization, and you don't all have to share this, but maybe hopefully somebody will raise their hand so I don't have to call on you. What is one of those 5 areas that you are just, you got it down, you know, you think you're well at it, and one area that probably you need to do a little bit of work on? Maybe share both of those. Anybody want to raise their hand before I call on somebody?
Larry, Ron, and
go for it, Ron.
I think the LWRCC, I think we got a lot of the enthusiasm. Board was committed. I think the planning and execution is going to be the hard part. I mean, everyone's so busy, and getting to that stage where we actually start assigning more direct responsibilities to individuals, and actually parsing that out from paper to action. So willingness and enthusiasm can take you a long way, but somebody's got to do the legwork, and I think that's the next phase, probably, is finding who those individuals are going to be that are more than just yeah, that sounds like a good idea, to I'll do my part. And so I think that's, as chairman, I'd love to carry the ball, but there's just no way I can carry the ball myself. And we've got two of our staff members on the conference here, Paige and David, but spreading that out and getting enough people involved to carry it forward. I think that, at least I see that as probably the immediate next challenge.
Right. Good. What about somebody from Island Village Montessori School? We haven't heard from you today. Can you share? I think Cindy's unmuting herself, maybe. Can somebody share from Island Montessori? If somebody's talking, they need to unmute.
Hey, sorry about that. I lost you for a minute.
Okay, gotcha.
Hi. If I could use sign language, I would have told you, but
That's okay.
I think
So Cindy, again, the question is, what is one of the areas that you think you're really good at, and one that you might need some help with as you move forward?
The area I think we're good at is the willingness. We definitely, I mean, who doesn't want to make extra money? I think we can all agree we all do. But it's, I guess, more of the readiness and maybe capacity too. And it's like Ron was saying, getting people on, once you start, when it actually starts moving forward, are people still going to be as enthusiastic? That's one thing I'm concerned about. It sounds great now. Yeah, let's bring in extra money. But now it's time to really do the legwork. And I think I'm concerned about that.
Right. That's why, good. Thank you for sharing. That communication piece that Mike shared is really important. Having to have those conversations and wanting to have those conversations with kind of everyone and their brother to make sure that they know kind of what's happening, what's going, and as you're moving forward, it's good. So thank you for sharing, Cindy. Mike.
And, again, we'll talk about this during our one-on-one Zoom session with each of you. So again, work through it on those worksheets, and then we'll make sure that we address it when we have our Zoom sessions. Okay. Well, we're going to move to wrap this session. So we've shared a lot with everyone today. Again, just in terms of what are those success factors that you should be looking at, thinking about, and considering as you're starting to move this forward in terms of pursuing an earned income venture. So what's next? We've got, as we shared with you today, some homework for you. Your homework is the worksheets. Worksheet 1 is all about kind of further assessing those earned income venture ideas. Remember those six questions we asked you about? Is there market need and demand? Can you do it with operational ease versus complexity, and so forth? Worksheet number 2 is considering that startup or growth funding and where it's going to come from. Worksheet 3 is communicating with your various stakeholders and being thoughtful and proactive about it. And worksheet 4, as we just shared, is all about kind of assessing your preparedness for success in terms of LWRCC. So please work on these worksheets, and we're going to ask that you send them to Larry and I should say, in advance of our mini Zoom sessions with each of you. Next up, hard to believe, is lab number 4. So that is actually going to be in person, I think, which we've shared with you in prior labs. It's on Wednesday, January 25th. So please make sure that's on your calendars. It's going to be from 8:30 till 1. And we're going to be doing it this time at Resilient Retreat. It's a wonderful organization with a wonderful venue. If you're not aware about who they are or what they do, you will be soon. They help survivors of trauma and abuse to improve their lives. The location is at 13010 Fruitville Road in Sarasota. And we will have light breakfast plus a lunch during that session. What are we going to do in lab 4? So again, remember, these labs all build on each other. So the topic at that lab is going to be about developing an earned income business plan. So we've been talking about what is a business plan, but we'll dive more into it, share kind of the key components of it. And as Yogi Berra said, it's critical to success. If you don't know where you're going, you're going to end up someplace else, as is the case with any type of plan.
All right.
Larry, over to you.
Yeah. I could probably turn it over to a participant to do these next 4 slides, since you've heard them a few times now. What's some criteria for participating in the 4th lab? You had to come to the first 3. We needed to have a CEO, ED, board member of staff at labs 2 and 3, which you all met that criteria, I believe. So that's part of that criteria. Complete and submit a follow-up survey, which you'll get tomorrow and I'll explain. And then the worksheets, as Mike said, we need to get those worksheets to have a really good in-depth discussion with you for our one-on-ones, which a lot of them are next week or the following week. So make sure you get those into us and email them. And then participate in those Zoom consulting sessions. And we want to make sure that you do have those calls prior to coming to the lab. It's important. And hopefully you understand that you get to know us a bit during those calls, and we've definitely gotten to know you a bit during those calls. And then each one of your team members need to register, as they have in the first 3 labs. Make sure that they do.
Hey, Larry, one thing just to add here, which we didn't include, there's a few organizations that apparently do not have up-to-date profiles in the giving partner. So I think we notified each of you if you fell into that category actually several weeks ago. So hopefully you've had a chance to follow up with the Community Foundation. Again, oftentimes your paperwork has been submitted and there's a lag in terms of when they post it as being up to date or current. But if there's any issue about your status, make sure that you follow up directly with the Community Foundation and let them know that you're participating in this initiative, and that in order for you to be able to move forward to the next phase, you have to have that up-to-date status. So again, if there's any questions about that, reach out to Larry or I or Josephine.
Hey, Mike.
Mike,
Sorry, there's just a Zoom question. I mean, a chat question from Margaret, and who should be on the Zoom calls.
Yeah, thank you, Margaret, for that question. It should be your team is on the Zoom call. And if you want to invite a couple of other board members or staff members that you think will be involved with the planning process, please include them. It's a good time for them to meet us, for them to hear kind of what's going on the team, and to work through the worksheets.
Also, just so you know, we do have some flexibility on the dates and times for those Zoom sessions. So if for some reason there's a conflict, with folks on your team, let Larry or I know, and we can offer up, other times to better meet your schedule. Okay. Also, for those of you who haven't completed the doodle poll that Larry or I sent you to pick a day and time, just make sure you do that. If you don't have that link, because I think we sent them out before the holidays and maybe they got lost in email, just let us know. All right.
So tomorrow you'll get an email from Josephine, which will include the recorded session. You'll get today's PowerPoint slides. You'll get the follow-up survey. You'll get the worksheets, and you'll also get the e-invitation to register for lab number 4. So a lot of information you'll get tomorrow. Definitely complete the worksheets and get registered for the lab, since it's coming up here in just a couple weeks. So Mike, maybe you can open it up. Any questions? Any overall questions about kind of today's lab or follow-up or anything that you would like to ask us before we say goodbye today? Hearing none?
Just, I have a question, because Josephine, I think you had said, let's see, Cindy Hoffman, we know that you're with Island Village Montessori, so we got that.
And I
Josephine,
got the other one.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you, though.
Good.
All right, well, we're giving you 10 minutes, the gift of time of 10 minutes today. So thank you all for another great session, for your engagement, your participation, your good contributions and questions. And we'll look forward to following up with you during our mini one-to-one Zooms.
Hey, Mike,
If you-
there's a quick question that, which I guess we could talk about later, but Barbara Banks said she's not receiving any emails from either of you.
Ah,
So we'll talk about that in our,
okay.
I'll
We will
make sure you have her email.
We'll make sure, Barbara Banks, that you get our emails. And in the event that you're not, we'll ask Kinsey if you can forward them on to Barbara, just to make sure. That would be a good thing.
Great.
Good, okay.
All right.
Everybody.
Take care, everybody.
We'll talk to you
soon.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.